It's MonsterVerse, baby.
Greenlit back in 2015, Godzilla vs. Kong moved into production at the same time as Godzilla King of the Monsters. The film landed up-and-coming horror director Adam Wingard in May of 2017. With a script that was constantly changing, the writer's credits for this movie continued to grow until production. One major script revision was done by King of the Monsters director Michael Dougherty. The script was more of a direct sequel to that film, dealing with the ramifications of the Mass Awakening and developing Monarch naturally from that movie. The Orca was back in the form of the Orca Z, and Skull Island was crucial to the exploration of Hollow-Earth. This script didn't last forever, undergoing massive changes that removed enormous elements from the film. During production of Godzilla vs. Kong, an altered version of the movie was being shot. This removed countless elements carried over from King of the Monsters and was a bit darker than the final movie. The film featured Lance Reddick in a prominent role as Serizawa's replacement at Monarch, Jessica Henwick as a reporter, alongside Zhejiang returning from the last movie. The new plot dealt with APEX Cybernetics using the Orca Z to lure Godzilla around the globe, making him rampage in different areas in an attempt to frame him so the public would support Mechagodzilla. Ren Serizawa was central to the story and had a definitive villain arc. Kong and Godzilla were drawn into war as a result of this chaos, mostly because of the Orca Z, and Mothra's rebirth occurred with her twins during a post-credits scene. Eventually, this script was radically altered during production, stripping it to its bare bones, changing countless characters' backstories and motivations, losing major key cast members, and dropping almost all connections to Godzilla King of the Monsters. The final film took its shape under the guidance of Adam Wingard. Wingard's goal was to make what he calls dense entertainment, a film that moved at a breezy pace and was built for rewatches, one that wasn't overly concerned with the broader cinematic universe, world building, or even plot mechanics. The film was meant to harken back to a simpler time in cinema, where viewers were transported off to action-packed worlds that came in under 2 hours, full of one-liners and massive explosions. Stuck in development hell and delayed multiple times by the global pandemic, Godzilla vs. Kong received the prestigious honor of being the film to reopen cinemas, dropping day and date in theaters and on HBO Max. The story begins somewhere on Skull Island as Kong awakens for his morning routine. Agitated and knowing something's wrong, Kong uses a tree as a spear to pierce the sun, revealing he's trapped in a containment dome on Skull Island. His only companion is Gia, the last surviving member of the Iwi tribe, who is now being looked after by Monarch's Skull Island leader Eileen Andrews. The island has been destroyed by a massive storm, leaving this as Kong's last habitable space. Bernie Hayes, a conspiracy theorist podcaster who's been embedded in APEX Cybernetics for years, steals documents on APEX's activities, believing they're up to no good. Godzilla appears and destroys the facility, revealing an enormous blinking mechanical eye. Madison Russell believes Godzilla's attack was motivated and not random, but she's dismissed by Mark, who is overwhelmed with the responsibility of leading Monarch through this crisis. Former Monarch geologist Nathan Lind is then approached by Walter Simmons and Ren Serizawa, the leads of APEX Cybernetics. Lind reveals his brother led a mission to Hollow-Earth that got the entire crew killed upon entry, making Nathan a disgrace and essentially forcing him into hiding. Ren and Walter have vehicles capable of Hollow-Earth travel and recruit Lind to lead a journey in search of a power source that will give APEX the ability to take on Godzilla. Lind convinces Monarch to help, securing Kong and transporting him to a Hollow-Earth portal in Antarctica, believing Kong will instinctually lead them to the power source. Gia calms Kong during a storm, revealing Kong can understand sign language and has a unique bond with Gia and will listen to her. Meanwhile, Madison and her friend Josh track down Bernie and team with him in order to break into the APEX remains to search for clues. Godzilla appears at sea, attacking Kong's convoy, going to war with the military, and eventually King Kong himself. Kong holds his own fairly well, considering he was sedated and trapped in the middle of the ocean with nowhere to go. The two battle underwater and atop an aircraft carrier. Eventually, Godzilla is tricked into thinking Kong is dead and leaves. Team Godzilla discovers a secret lab under APEX and boards a transport vessel for skullcrawler eggs that takes them through an underground tunnel from Florida to APEX's headquarters in Hong Kong. Kong is airlifted to Antarctica and enters the portal after Gia tells him it's possible he has family inside. The Hollow-Earth anti-gravity vehicles are launched and Team Kong makes it to the other side, discovering Hollow-Earth isn't just a cave system but is instead a planet within the planet. They're attacked by titans called Warbats, with Kong defending them. Then they follow Kong on his instinctual journey. Team Godzilla learns APEX Apex has built a Mechagodzilla meant to exterminate the Titans and protect humanity. Operated by Ren Serizawa, Mechagodzilla kills an enormous skullcrawler. Kong then discovers his ancestral home, a massive temple built into a mountain. He discovers a royal axe made from the corpses of one of Godzilla's relatives. Kong then takes his place atop a throne in the kingdom. Team Godzilla learns that Apex is using Ghidorah's skull as a DNA computer that can telepathically link to another Ghidorah skull inside Mechagodzilla so that Ren can pilot Mechagodzilla without being inside it. Kong's axe randomly activates, and he places it in a circuit that draws energy from Hollow Earth's core. Simmons' daughter, Maya, scans the energy and sends it to Apex, where they use it to amplify Mechagodzilla's power. Godzilla arrives in Hong Kong, going on a rampage. Responding to Kong's axe, Godzilla uses his atomic breath like a drill to Hollow Earth, a feat that he pulls off in only minutes and somehow perfectly breaks through Kong's temple directly from the surface. Kong's temple is destroyed, and Kong grabs the axe and jumps through the newly opened portal to the surface to take on Godzilla. The two battle in Hong Kong with a fantastic intro. The sequence is excitingly shot, well lit, and allows the monster fight to take the center stage. Unfortunately, after the 40 best seconds of fist-to-fist action ever put to screen between two monsters, the fight devolves into Godzilla chasing Kong around with his atomic breath until Kong uses the axe, charging it with Godzilla's atomic breath to knock Godzilla out, winning round 2. Round 3 kicks off with Kong tricking Godzilla and smashing him into a building. It ends only a minute later as Godzilla goes on the full offensive, overpowering Kong and stomping him into the ground, the clear winner between the two. Godzilla roars at Kong, expecting him to submit, but when Kong roars back at Godzilla, Godzilla seems to gain some respect for the ape and lets go. Kong passes out as Mechagodzilla activates. The robot is overrun with Hollow Earth energy, triggering the Ghidorah skull to merge with an AI, creating the villainous Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla kills Simmons, with Serizawa seemingly dying to electricity, and then erupts from a mountain, going on a rampage and destroying Hong Kong. Godzilla does his best to fight Mechagodzilla, but is perfectly countered at every move and constantly overpowered. Lind uses a heave to revive Kong, with Gia explaining that Kong needs to save Godzilla. The two titans team up to take on Mechagodzilla very briefly. Godzilla is knocked out, and it becomes a 1v1 between King Kong and Mechagodzilla. Team Godzilla spills alcohol on a computer, buying Kong enough time for Godzilla to supercharge the axe, allowing him to chop Mechagodzilla into pieces. Kong then decapitates Mechagodzilla. After a brief rest, Godzilla appears, seemingly ready for round 4. Kong realizes Godzilla isn't looking for a fight and drops the axe. Godzilla then returns to sea, with the two of them seemingly having a truce. Kong moves to Hollow Earth, where he's free to live as king, happy and at peace for the first time since the movie started. Godzilla vs. Kong is such a tricky film. On the one hand, this movie is an enormous mess. This is the only live-action installment to the MonsterVerse that you can pause any single scene and find countless plot holes or confusing details. Things as simple as, if Godzilla's attacking Apex looking for the eye, how did he never find it? It's amplifying a signal that's drawing him to it, and he even exposes it. Ghidorah found the Orca with no trouble, so what gives here? The world building is incredibly sloppy. I could nitpick it for hours, but I'll save you the time by only going through a few key examples. Hollow Earth was discovered in the last film as a tunnel network inside of the planet. Now it's been dismissed by Monarch for some reason until they rediscover it as a planet within the planet, making the tunnel system Godzilla was using in the last film make no sense. Where did the second Ghidorah skull come from? In Godzilla King of the Monsters, the only one that survived the events of the film was the one decapitated off of Isla de Mara. If Jonah sold that one to Simmons, where did the second one inside of Mechagodzilla come from? The novelization says there's 2 Ghidorah skulls, and the movie says there's 2, but Wingard had to sheepishly admit that Bernie must be wrong about his theory, otherwise it's a continuity error during a Toho Kingdom interview. Mark Russell went from being an expert on Titan behavior, understanding firsthand when Godzilla, someone he hated, was warning Monarch about Ghidorah and decided to team with him, and someone who was constantly outsmarting every one of his peers when it came to the Titan's behaviors, yet here he dismisses Godzilla's actions in a single sentence. Mark isn't the only one acting out of character. This movie erases an entire cinematic universe's worth of development for Godzilla. We are 11 entries deep, and now, all of the sudden, Godzilla is no longer a noble warrior, there isn't a shred of him being the key to coexistence, that's not even brought up in the movie, and instead Godzilla's a racist who hates Kong because of his ancestors. Kong leaving the island doesn't disturb nature's balance in any single way. The island is already destroyed, with Kong no longer needing to protect it. He's not using vital resources or destroying anything. Godzilla attacks him out of nowhere. The movie overcomplicates this, saying that it's because of an ancestral war between the two of them, or maybe it's because they're both Alpha Titans, a concept which this movie takes way too literally. The monsters bowing at the end of King of the Monsters was supposed to be more of a metaphor for them backing down from the fight from Godzilla and cementing him as the King of the Monsters. The MonsterVerse is over reliance on alphas, a concept that doesn't actually exist in nature, is a little cringy and embarrassing at this point. Godzilla laughing and enjoying the fight with Kong comes out of nowhere, as does his disregard for humanity. Godzilla goes out of his way to avoid hurting people in the 2014 film and in King of the Monsters, only doing so when he had no other choice. Here, he deliberately kills the military transport and attacks bridges and rampages in Hong Kong. It's just very out of character, completely destroying the themes of the last movie, building to the key to coexistence. The world building in this movie is so sloppy that I've even had to overindulge some of the plot synopsis to help explain things that don't actually make much sense. It's almost impossible for the Godzilla fandom to discuss this movie without using evidence and examples as to what's going on inside this film from outside media, such as the novelizations, which aren't considered hard canon. People constantly refer back to interviews with Adam Wingard, the movie's commentary, or downright headcanon to explain things like the Hollow Earth energy source, the fate of Ren Serizawa, or how Godzilla could possibly lose to Mechagodzilla. This movie cared so little about integration into the MonsterVerse at large and organic world building that things like Kingdom Kong and Monarch Legacy of Monsters have had to work their butts off to explain why Skull Island was destroyed or how Apex could have built Mechagodzilla, who, as it stands, comes completely out of nowhere in this movie, along with everything else Apex does, such as their existence, the heaves, and their tunnel from one side of the planet to the next. As an entry of a cinematic universe, Godzilla vs. Kong is really frustrating. It hardly tries to connect to the world at large. This movie is a movie where things just kinda happen because they do. Characters' motivations and even the plot itself don't matter. They exist simply to get the viewer from one action sequence to the next. Massive portions of this film could have been removed with nothing changing. Characters' decisions almost never matter. Team Godzilla only exists to slow Mechagodzilla down for literal seconds. That is the only meaningful thing they accomplish in the entire movie, and if you recut that scene, you wouldn't even need them in the moment. Mark Russell and Ren Serizawa have nothing to do. Serizawa's connection to Dr. Serizawa from the previous movies isn't even addressed. He's a glorified background character with less than 10 lines of dialogue and accomplishes nothing meaningful during the film's runtime, and then he dies. He's just another symbol of this movie's abandonment of the lore and world building which was done previously, a shining example of this movie's missed potential. A great sequel builds upon the themes of the previous movie in meaningful ways. It develops the world organically with carryovers from the films prior that reward viewers for sticking with the series. Godzilla vs. Kong does not do this. It doesn't have any meaningful themes to develop at all. It's possible to view this movie as a story about letting go of pride and ego or letting go of past hatred, but Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, a direct sequel to this movie from the same creative team, undoes the ending of this movie by showing Godzilla still hates Kong. This movie is the first MonsterVerse movie without anything to say. It doesn't even attempt. This movie compromises the themes of the previous films and only exists for one purpose: spectacle. When viewed as an installment of an ongoing cinematic universe, Godzilla vs. Kong falters. Where it succeeds is as a standalone film. While I believe a great movie rewards viewers for engaging in the material, this film proves a movie can still be pretty good for doing the opposite. If you watch this movie the way it's intended to be viewed, it is a fantastic time. A true classic turn your brain off popcorn flick. Godzilla vs. Kong knew what it wanted to do and did it very well, prioritizing spectacle over story. The film develops King Kong in deep and interesting ways that root him as the central protagonist and make the movie all about his journey. It's incredibly exciting to watch him develop and come into his own. Kong's connection to Jia is the core of this movie, grounding it in relatable emotions of friendship and bonding. The movie is at its peak when it's telling King Kong's story. His quieter character moments all stand out very well. Kong embracing his ancestral lineage and becoming king is a moment I will never forget. Kong is also elevated here, now possessing intelligent thought never before seen with this character, even going as far as to allow him to speak in ways that doesn't feel forced or out of place. Wingard accomplishes what he wanted. This movie is as fast as possible while not feeling too overwhelming. Viewers never have to sit long before something exciting happens. Godzilla turning heel is so fun to watch. While it doesn't vibe with the character so far, his attack against Apex and the military, they're so classic that you can't help but smile. The fights with Kong are rapid, throwing out the physics of the universe and doing away with the monstrous fighting style developed previously in favor of wrestling moves, which is a little less interesting, but it still somehow works pretty well. The action sequences are instantly iconic and carry lots of intensity as a result of you engaging in Kong's journey. The film's pretty clear from the start about who's going to win. They say it within the first few minutes, but that doesn't take away from the enjoyment of seeing these two icons smash into each other and doesn't ruin your ability to want Kong to win. In many ways, this movie feels like a reboot of the MonsterVerse itself. While it was meant to cap off Phase 1, the radical shift in priorities behind the scenes make this movie feel like a fresh jumping off point. The tonal adjustment which was made to this movie, making things sillier than they have ever been in the live-action MonsterVerse so far, far, and throwing out the realism of all installments prior, this movie set the stage for projects like Skull Island and Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, and feels more cohesive with those than it does with what came before. Its true biggest issue is its lack of confidence in itself. Characters are constantly pointing out how stupid the plot is, which doesn't fix the plot they're making fun of, it just draws attention to it. I think this was done so viewers know the filmmakers are on their side, but it feels more like they just weren't confident in their ideas and were trying to make up for that. This can be seen no better than with the title of the movie itself. For a movie called Godzilla vs. Kong, this movie really didn't live up to 60 years worth of hype leading into the rematch as it should have. Godzilla and Kong's fights are actually really short. The sequences themselves are drawn out, but the actual combat is very brief. They're also clearly too afraid to pick a definitive winner, forcing Mechagodzilla into this movie, distracting from runtime that could have been used to build the world, characters, or to see Godzilla and Kong actually throw down. This is made more frustrating by the next film, where they still don't get along and repeat the same plot beat of having to team up after a fight against a bigger threat. Just save it for the sequel in that case. This doesn't undo how awesome it is to see the two of them fight side by side and how epic it is to see King Kong fight Mechagodzilla, but it does prove they weren't confident in the premise of King Kong and Godzilla fighting to carry a movie. Maybe this one should have been called Godzilla x Kong in the first place, taking the weight of expectations away and allowing for them to tell the story they did. Godzilla vs. Kong is such a mixed bag. On the one hand, the movie drives me crazy with sloppy world building, bad continuity, rough characterization, and horrible plagiarized music that accompanies Godzilla, which rips off Akira Ifukube so closely it feels like a downright insult. On the other hand, I really love the film. It's fun and exciting and delivers so many iconic scenes. Team Kong is great, with Gia standing out as one of the best characters in the MonsterVerse. The film develops Kong in ways that elevate him as a character and allow for so much potential moving forward. The action is all top-notch with wonderful cinematography from Ben Sirison. The fight choreography is, at times, better than it's ever been in a Godzilla film. Kong's music from Junkie XL is kick-ass, as is the Hollow Earth, which breaks the universe but has so much potential. This movie is constantly trying new things and pushing boundaries in ways I really appreciate. And best of all, it worked. Adam Wingard's plan to create dense entertainment worked. This movie moves so fast that it holds up very well upon rewatches, so long as you aren't thinking about what's happening. If you need an escape from reality, this is your best choice. It offers a fun, exciting, and mentally relaxing break from the stressful world we live in. I would gladly recommend Godzilla vs. Kong to any King Kong, Godzilla, or MonsterVerse fan, or fan of 80s or 90s action films who are willing to turn their brains off and have a good time. Thank you all for watching another episode of MonsterVerse May. I really appreciate it. If you want to see upcoming episodes of MonsterVerse May early, please consider supporting the channel using the link in the description below to the Patreon. By supporting the Patreon, that is the most direct way to support this channel and to make sure that I can continue to make videos like this for you. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man, out.